From the library of the New York Stock Exchange at the corner of Wall and Broad Streets in New York City, you're inside the Ice House, our podcast from Intercontinental Exchange on markets, leadership, and vision in global business. The dream drivers that have made the NYSE an indispensable institution of global growth for over 225 years. Each week, we feature stories of those who hatch plans, create jobs, and harness the engine of capitalism. Right here, right now at the NYSE and at ICE's 12 exchanges and 6 clearinghouses around the world. And now welcome inside the Ice House.
Welcome back inside the Ice House. I'm your host, Pete Ash. In our last episode, Uber Technologies General Counsel, Tony West, sat down with us and discussed the future of that ubiquitous app that lets you catch a ride, grab a meal, or even one day fly to your next destination. Instant connectivity through an app is delivered by an incredible technology stack using geolocation, directional mapping, and electronic payment integration. And one more thing, and we've all been there, standing on the corner and your phone tells you your car has arrived. You look, try and remember what a Ford Focus actually looks like, but you can't find it. Your phone buzzes again, it's a text from the driver letting you know he's pulled up and is waiting. Finally, the phone rings. The number looks like any other number, but as we'll find out today, it isn't exactly what it appears. You pick up and hear the friendly voice of your ride saying, "Look left," and off you go. The technology behind that interaction comes from Vonage Holding, NYSE ticker VG. The company that first brought us voice over IP is in the midst of a transformation that, as its CEO and our guest today, Alan Masarek, describes, is redefining business communications. How has Vantage retooled itself through strategic acquisitions and constant innovation? Why will the future be in the cloud, and how will your number divorce itself from your phone? Our conversation with Alan Masarek coming up right after the break.
It's more than an iconic building or a global financial marketplace. It's anywhere technology, commerce, and people intersect. The innovation that makes people's lives better. Dreams that were once impossible are now realities. At the New York Stock Exchange, we help tech companies flourish and change the world. So go ahead, bring those ideas to life. We'll bring it to market. We are Living Tech.
Our guest today, Alan Masarek, was named Vonage's CEO in November 2014 and has been responsible for the company's turnaround and transformation from a voice-over IP provider to a global business cloud communications leader. Alan is a serial entrepreneur and came to Vonage from Google following the acquisition of QuickOffice, a company he founded. Alan, welcome inside the Ice House and welcome back to the New York Stock Exchange.
Pete, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
So Nexmo, which is the platform behind that Uber communication ability, was acquired by Vonage in 2016 for just a bit more than the company used to spend yearly to run these ads. The Vonage you joined back in 2014 was well known for its jingle and being a major player in the residential customer space, but was actually entering its 6th year of declining sales. What was happening?
Again, I joined in 2014. Again, as you say, that we were in the 6th consecutive year of decline in residential. If you go back to 2008, think what happened in that period. That was through the advent of the smartphone. The iPhone was invented in 2007, the first Android device, the end of 2008. And so effectively, the residential home category has been in decline since the proliferation of smartphones. And so by 2014, again, we were in the 6th consecutive year. As you enter 2019, you're in the 11th consecutive year. So when I was recruited from Google, the whole goal that I came in to do was to effect a transformation of the company to move us into business communications. We had made one baby step in business communications through an initial acquisition, but at that point we were still 92% revenue in residential in the consumer business and 8% business. Here in 2019, we've now fully transformed and we're more than 2/3 business and 1/3 consumer.
Yeah, and that's the Vocalocity acquisition in 2013 you're referencing.
Vocalocity acquisition, yes.
And I want to talk about that joining. You know, you'd come from Google, one of the largest tech companies in the world, but your background had been more in the startup world. I alluded at the intro. Why was Vonage the right opportunity for you?
What was interesting for me when I was being recruited at Google was the opportunity to take an iconic brand. I mean, think about it. Go back to this notion of spending $200 million a year in television advertising over a course of a decade to create this iconic brand in Vonage. And I thought it was sort of an interesting intellectual challenge to take an iconic consumer brand and reposition it into business. That's exactly what we've done. With the brand, we've also there is an infrastructure that is the nature of, we still terminate 15 billion minutes of call volume a year. Again, going back to the residential business, that network infrastructure is at a scale which is unique relative to the business cloud communications players. So we're able to take a much beefier, more substantial global infrastructure, and now that was built around the residential business, and now apply that to business cloud.
And you were talking about the cloud. Today, I think the cloud has won over. Most technology platforms, communication, otherwise, have gone that way. But 5 years ago, was that definitely the direction you wanted to head?
It was. The way I like to describe the transformation that we've been through is I like to talk about the consumer to business transformation is over. It's still a piece of the business. It's about a third of the revenue, but it is in constant and steady decline. Business is growing more than twice the rate of the decline of the consumer business. So now that business is the majority and it is growing so quickly, those lines will separate, if you will, very quickly. And so if it's 2/3, 1/3 in terms of proportionality this year, next year you can imagine it being 3/4, 1/4, the following year 80/20, et cetera, et cetera. And so I always say that's the transformation from consumer to business is done. What's much more interesting is the transformation within business, because what's happened in the communications or in the cloud communication space is you've moved from an applications approach to now a platform approach. What I mean by that is cloud communications are prepackaged applications. So you have the phone system or you have the contact center system. That technology has been around for 50 years. What's happened now in the move to cloud is those applications have moved, or the software delivery for those applications has moved from premise-based to cloud, and the revenue model has moved from a license model to a SaaS model. But the underlying functionality is quite similar. Now what's happened is those prepackaged applications are now themselves being disrupted by platform models, and that's what we've grown into. So a platform model, think of it as a core platform of microservices for the communication space, and this exists in almost every vertical. At its simplest, think of it as a video microservice, an audio microservice, a messaging microservice. Those get packaged into a use case called phone system or packaged into a use case called contact center, but increasingly they're sold unpackaged, and they're then programmed into other environments. You cited earlier the Uber example, where Vonage communication functionality is what provides that ability for driver and passenger to find one another in app. So what we do is we spawn a proxy number in the local area code. So frequently the passenger thinks it's the driver's number, but it's specifically a proxy number. It hides the identity of the driver's number, protects the privacy of the passenger's number, so that they can find each other. Because if you think about Uber's revenue model, they only get paid when passenger finds driver. So that's how you use a piece of programmable communication that gets embedded in, programmed into the Uber app, because without it, their revenue model would suffer, because often passenger and driver would fail to find one another.
Or they just call each other and skip the service completely.
The reason why it's a proxy number and it hides the identity is that from the ride-sharing company, Uber, Lyft, whomever, what they're concerned about is revenue leakage. They do not want the passenger knowing the driver's actual number for fear that you'd do exactly that. You'd call the driver and say, hey, I'll give you $10, just pick me up in 30 minutes. They want it always to go through the system because that's what their revenue model is all about. And then on the passenger side, clearly, I don't want the driver to know my daughter's phone number, as an example. So it's very, very important to protect the privacy of the passenger.
So we've actually now touched on 2 acquisitions, but I want to just step back a little bit and just talk about, acquisitions have definitely been central to how you've reinvented Vonage. Coming from the Quick Office acquisition by Google, what did you learn from that experience that has helped you now on the other side of the table as you're bringing in these smaller companies into the Vonage family?
I try to bring the sort of the notion of entrepreneurial management now to bigger scale at Vantage. The company that I sold to Google, Quick Office, had 350 employees. We at Vantage are 2,500 employees and a very, very global footprint. So the scale is much different. But I'm trying to bring the agility, the innovative nature of a startup, the agility of an organization, the kind of bottoms-up thought process. Many, large companies too frequently are overly hierarchical, overly top-down in their decision-making. So I'm trying to bring that entrepreneurial view into a larger footprint, because the one thing that we've done in this transformation is go very fast. And so my whole bias has been a bias for action. We make decisions all the time. They're not 100% correct. But the whole notion is make new decisions, fix as you go. It's sort of a launch and iterate mindset, which is what you have to learn in a startup environment, because no startup ever goes in a straight line.
Right, and it's interesting to talk about the integration. I was actually reading back some of the early reporting about the acquisition of the Uber backend software, and almost every San Francisco blogger was saying how, oh no, Vonage, big company, it won't be able to integrate this for years. What is your integration philosophy? How do you get from 2016 acquiring a separate company to now it's kind of underpinning your entire business?
I've been involved in startups and build-ups, because even within the startups, we've done some acquisitions. And even going back to early in my career, I've got a background in the private equity world coming out of business school. So I've been buying companies for a long time. The key thing is to be very decisive on integration decisions. The risk all the time is to let those decisions kind of languish. That is the exact wrong thing to do. The other key thing, and it's more important than some of those integration decisions, is the cultural integration of the company. And so when you take something which are, these smaller companies that they themselves are venture-backed, generally fast-moving companies themselves, bringing them into a larger company environment, you have to be very, very sensitive to the cultural implications that, you don't want someone to feel like they've been sort of, put under the thumb of a larger, bureaucratic institution. We worked really, really hard to avoid that. Now, we make mistakes with that, but I think generally we've been successful. The key thing, we've done $1 billion of purchase price, roughly, but the revenues today are triple what the revenues were in the years of acquisition of the companies that we acquired. So the strategy has been inorganic growth, funded again, going back to the cash flows we generate from the residential business. So inorganic growth, and then very, very fast follow-on organic growth has resulted in a tripling of those revenues since. And that's now how the proportionality of our business has changed. And what will happen is you'll begin to look at us really as just an enterprise SaaS company, because consumer will get smaller each year, business will get larger faster. And so you now will begin to look at us on a consolidated basis, simply because the muting impact on growth of the consumer business will be less and less, because it's becoming proportionally smaller and smaller.
And that idea of where you're now able to operate through these acquisitions, I was listening to you speak last year, and you were dropping an alphabet soup of acronyms of spaces you're working in. UCaaS, Unified Communications as a Service, CCaaS, Contact Center as a Service, CPaaS, Communications Platform as a Service. How do you compete in these spaces against sort of the pure play competitors?
It's interesting. I have spoken extensively about rejecting the alphabet soup notion that these are business segments. UCaaS, Unified Communications as a Service, has generally been the phone system as it's sort of evolved from premise-based to cloud-based. Contact Center as a Service is the same in the contact center environment. And then what they call CPaaS, Communications Platform as a Service, are those unbundled microservices that get programmed in something else. Again, expressed as a few lines of API code. Our position, and this is why we've moved into a full platform model, is that these are not industry segments. Yes, there are pure plays who play in those areas, but we think those pure plays will be significantly disadvantaged in the future, because at the end of the day, it's just use cases. A company may need enterprise telephony, enterprise communications, sort of rooted in the PBX, the phone system. Same company may need contact center. In the past, contact center was for its support organization as customers called in. Now, as often, it's for the sales organizations as you call out. The point being is that it's all kind of sort of mushing together, if you will. So it's just use cases that at the end of the day comes down to the underlying microservices. There's video, there's voice, there's SMS, there's IP messaging. So build a platform from the components, package those into the use cases. Again, call it UCaaS, call it CCaaS, but package those into the use cases that are, very, very big markets unto themselves, because customers have been using those use cases for decades, and also package them as individual APIs that then customers can program into their other environments, apropos to the Uber example. Our view is the winning proposition will be a platform model. And just go back and think about all the value created across the stock markets over the last 10 or 15 years. It really has been platform models that are winning the day and adding, extraordinary value. I think in communications, we're in, sort of in this sort of right in the beginning of this renaissance, and sort of this where communications will be everywhere, no longer tethered to an individual device. And so you have to serve it from a platform model in our view. So I love our positioning where we are going forward.
Part of that API ability is you can then add in additional services, maybe not through an acquisition. Just a couple weeks ago, you announced a strategic partnership with Sendinblue. How have you leveraged partnerships versus acquisitions in general? And what about Sendinblue will really bolster what you've been calling One Vonage?
So One Vonage is the platform that within it has the modes of communication. So there is all the microservices around video, around audio, around IP messaging, around SMS. We did the deal with Sendinblue as a JV because email is also a significant element of enterprise communications. But we think that email is clearly much more in the past, while messaging and full collaboration going omni-channel, where you're able to move mode to mode, from video to audio to IP messaging to chat, what have you, is much more where the world's going. But we feel it's still a necessary piece of the package. We just chose not to acquire it. Some of our competitors have chose to acquire in that area. We chose just to do it through partnership.
And one of the things that inside of that, I just happened to notice this yesterday when I was on the Nexmo website, is AI is starting to play a role. I logged on, it was late at night, little bot popped up and let me know that all the humans had gone home to sleep, but it was there to help us. So what role will AI play in this kind of organic platform?
AI is a critical element in terms of making communications smarter and more contextual. And what's happening in communications is, well, let me back up for a second. You can think about AI in a contact center use case where you have these machine learning models that, based upon reviewing thousands and thousands of phone calls, can sort of identify whether this customer is, or this prospect is, a likely candidate to buy versus someone based upon verbal cues is an unlikely prospect to buy. And so you'll route that call in a certain way based upon, again, the artificial intelligence telling you, again, in a probabilistic way, whether it's likely to buy or unlikely to buy. Same way in a service setting. Is somebody sufficiently upset that I want to route them to the supervisor sooner versus later because I'm trying to manage, that customer's, satisfaction. But really the AI even transcends much, much more than that, because the whole notion where communication is going to is what we refer to as contextual communications, where it learns based upon activities. Think about if today you go to a website and you look at a red bicycle. You say, I'm interested in that red bicycle. You'll then leave that website and you might pick up a phone and call some 800 number and then come in without any context and say, I'd like to talk to somebody about this red bicycle. Well, where communications is going to, from within the website, you'll have the opportunity to click to communicate. The software understands that you're on the red bicycle photograph or looking at the specs of the red bicycle. It then intelligently routes you to somebody who is the authority on that particular model bicycle. That's where it's all going. And so now in this example, where in the past I mode shift, I'm on a website and then I go to a phone call. Today it's simply, and you lose context. I have to reintroduce what I'm looking for. Now where you're going in contextual communications is it understands where I was. Even though I was in a web interaction, now I go into a voice interaction, the context comes with, so it knows how to route me. Lots and lots of applications of AI in those sorts of things so that the communications, the interactions become more intelligent.
And so that contextual, the intelligent interaction, it requires data.
Yes.
And that's a big thing. Vonage is a big player in Europe as well, and with particularly the general data protection regulation that's come out in the EU. How do you balance the ability to kind of personalize that individual's digital experience with making sure they're comfortable with what the machine knows about them?
You have to respect all the issues of regulation around GDPR, around data privacy and the like. We have information which is, unlike some of the social networks who have greater challenges in privacy because they have greater access to personal information, we don't. We'll have call detail records, but they're fully anonymized. I care less that it's you. I may be analyzing thousands and thousands of phone calls so that the machine understands, going back to the earlier example, whether probabilistically you are a likely buyer or probabilistically you are so dissatisfied as a support call that I need to route you in a certain direction. But it's anonymized relative to you. So we comply with all the issues of data privacy in Europe and elsewhere, and we use this information in a way, again, so that we can make that interaction more intelligent, but it doesn't get any problems with with privacy concerns.
So not to get hung up on the Nexmo bot, but it was kind of a very fun thing for me to stumble upon last night. And what I thought was interesting is that, it popped up, it welcomed me to the website, and then it kind of gave me sort of three options. Where do I want to go from here? And how does, kind of unified communications, this one platform, how is that going to change the customer's experience, whether it's with your own products or one of your clients' products?
The importance of an integrated, unified platform, again, go back to the example, whether the subsystems, the microservices are video, voice, SMS, IP messaging. The whole idea is that you want to enable a customer to be able to move across whatever modes of communication they are, because businesses all are trying to differentiate based on the customer experience, how you make the customer feel. What's happened in the internet economy is it's ever more difficult for a business, a brand, to differentiate on its product. Quite frankly, even its price, even its location, because in one keystroke, you can order something similar to that product anywhere on the globe, shop for the lowest price, and have it delivered tomorrow. So businesses have to differentiate based upon the experience. How do they make you feel in the interactions with you as a customer, you as a prospect? Communications is critical to that, because think about every interaction you have with a business is coloring your sentiment about the business. And so we've all called into businesses from a support perspective or heard from them in a sales perspective where it's been incredibly demoralizing, demeaning, frustrating. And think of then what our perception of the brand is. It goes down. And then we've all had experiences with brands that are delightful because they can help me, they can resolve my question, they know who I am, they route me properly to somebody who's the authority on what I need. Well, think about the significance of communications, the ability to do that. So go back to the example, I started on your website, I'm interested in your products, I pick up the phone in kind of the yesteryear model and call you and have this frustrating experience that I have to explain why I've called you. Well, think about how more pleasing the experience is where I simply click to communicate from within the website. The software understands what I was doing on the website. That's what the bot is trying to give you an opportunity to do, and route you properly to somebody. I used the example before, looking at the red bicycle, and it understands that, and then routes me to the agent who understands that particular brand of bicycle. The whole notion is intelligent interactions. That's what drives a pleasing customer experience. And brands have to differentiate based upon how they make you feel. And it's all about the communication experiences.
It actually kind of brings something to mind. How about social? If you think about it, a lot of times if I'm dealing with an airline and it's delayed, that's my mode of communication. I'm gonna tweet at them. Maybe I'll tweet at the airport. Is that something that you're looking to kind of also bring into this platform?
Absolutely, and it already does. many companies may not even have a website. They've now moved to a Facebook page. So somebody could come to your brand, they find you as a Facebook page, not as a particular URL, not as a particular website. In Asia, think about how WeChat or WhatsApp are used as commerce. They're chat networks, but now they're commerce networks. So whether I try to reach you in the traditional way by phoning you, or I reach you through social, one of the major chat apps, or social networks, or anything in between, I have to be able to move from channel, social, to another channel, voice, to another channel, chat, in a way that the context of what I'm there doing carries forward. If I'm able to do that, I can provide a pleasing interaction with the customer, and therefore then the customer has a more delightful view of the brand. If I can't do that, that company is going to sort of look like a Luddite, in my view, over time. You have to create this multimodal, across modes of communication, contextual communication in order to provide the most pleasing experience for the customer.
Meet the customer where they are and talk to them how they want to talk to you.
That's precisely right. And that's precisely what we're doing. That's the whole underpinning of the One Vonage approach, so that we can provide multimodal communications contextually as you move from one mode of communication to the other. That's exactly what we're doing in the One Vonage platform.
After the break, Alan Masarek and I will discuss how Vonage will continue to innovate in the business cloud communication space. Stay tuned for the second half of our conversation.
And now a word from Chip Berg, CEO of Levi Strauss & Company, NYSE ticker LEVI.
There's no other brand in the world like Levi's. We're here today because of the dedication of the 15,000 employees that we have around the world. Growth is being driven across the company. Men's, women's, tops, bottoms, outerwear. Virtually every country in the world grew last year. Being associated with an institution that goes back further than Levi's is special. This is where this company deserves to be.
Before the break, CEO of Vonage Holding, Alan Masarek, and I were discussing how under his leadership, the company has transformed itself through strategic acquisitions and a unified communication platform philosophy. Alan, full disclosure, I am a New Jersey resident and live close to the Vonage campus.
Love it. Okay.
Which in the last few years has included a number of amenities, including a soccer field that I've had the opportunity to join the post-Wednesday workday game.
Good.
Vonage's headquarters has undergone a physical change that mirrors its business transformation. I mean, is that a nod to your experience with Google and the West Coast style campus?
The key thing when you transform a company as quickly as we have is it's clear to see the business mission has shifted from residential to business. And even within business, moving from an applications approach more to a platform approach. But as difficult as that is, the cultural migration is equally important and as difficult. Some of the things that you're noting in the campus in Homedale is how do you create a culture of innovation physically? And so one of the key lessons that I brought from Google is, and a goal that I set out when I got here almost 5 years ago, was I wanted Vonage to become a destination place to work. Now the CEO can stand up at an all hands, as I did, and wave your hand and say, we want to be a destination place to work. But how do you turn that ambition into something real? What we've done is we have created 3 sort of legs to the stool around rewards and recognition, growth and development, and culture. Culture expresses itself physically as well. So culture is things like the workspace. So I like to tease when I got to Vonage, I always say, and you know the building living in New Jersey, I used to say that building could make a hospital look warm. We've completely transformed the building, similar to completely transforming the company, so that, stealing a page from Google, it now has an amenity package in the building, or the soccer fields, the cricket pitch, the baseball diamond, things like that. That's what you see outside, but a whole variety of things you've done inside. Again, trying to create a physical environment that stimulates that culture.
Yeah, and that cricket field seems to be filled 24/7. It's an amazing thing. Vonage also isn't just in Homedale, New Jersey. We touched on it. Offices throughout the United States, Europe, and 8 in Asia. How do you create a One Vonage culture that goes along with the One Vonage product offering?
Creating a One Vonage product is difficult, and we're hard at it, and we're making great progress. But similarly, it's equally difficult to create a One Vonage culture. It's ever more difficult trying to do it in a global footprint, having then built that global footprint through acquisitions where those acquired companies had their own sort of culture and idiosyncrasies. And so the simple answer to this is it's something that we work at very, very hard under this notion of Vonage being a destination place to work. And so you're trying to extend out single company messaging, single company values, single company branding worldwide. Again, I always describe the cultural shift as a journey without destination because you're always working at it. And when you have the underlying mission of the company changing, again, it just introduces another variable, making this more difficult. And so we're hard at it. I'm proud of the fact that things like our Glassdoor rankings are showing a excellent improvement of late. Our employee net promoter scores are improving. And again, hard to do these things in the midst of such rapid change, but I feel you got to be very intentional about it. And so creating these programs around destination place to work, and then looking at rewards and recognition, growth and development, and culture are just key sort of facets of it. And programmatically, there are many, many programs, whether like take culture, it's not just the physical workspaces, things like the Vonage Foundation. In our whole set of values, corporate social responsibility is a big, it's important to me personally, it's important to sort of so many members of the whole company. So now funding the Vonage Foundation and then also funding VTO, volunteer time off, are just critical elements of how you build a healthy culture.
Do you get around to the different offices throughout the year?
I do. I travel a great deal. Matter of fact, you mentioned the 8 offices in Asia. So I'll be second half of September. I've got a 2-week trip. I'm going to go to Beijing. I'm going to Singapore, Sydney, Australia. I've got to stop with a customer meeting in Jakarta, Indonesia. And then I end my trip in Poland, where we have a development center there as well. So I travel a great deal, but you have to because it's just so important to convey. There's no replacement for the CEO being out there and speaking, face to face with folks in articulating the mission of the company and the culture of the company and being there in person and breaking bread with people. So we do that a great deal, and it's not just me, other members of my team. We try to do that a great amount, and it's just critical. And it's critical in any company, I think, but it's more critical in something that's grown so quickly as we have.
And so when I was reading a couple years ago, you were saying that you actually personally reviewed every hire. So when you joined, I think there were about 1,200 employees. You've mentioned about 2,500.
Correct.
I imagine there's been some turnover even in those years. You were very interested in making sure you reviewed every single hire, to use your own words, as quality control and to make sure everyone is wicked smart. Do you still take that on? I mean, are you able to do that for your office in Poland?
I still do, for every salaried employee. My belief is the following. It's not that I don't trust the hiring manager at all. It's simply that I think of it as a quality control notion. But the point is, and again, this is sort of a page from the Google playbook. So Larry Page was still CEO when I was there. And up until not too many years ago, he did the same. And the idea is every hiring manager, before they, the expression, put a butt in a seat, I want them to know that that hiring packet, that dossier is going to come across my desk, and I'm going to sign off not on the budget for that position. I'm signing off that you're hiring, Susie or John or Jane or whomever specifically. And I ask questions and I push back because I think you've got to make sure that you start, when you're trying to build a destination place to work, you have to start with talent. And so I love to refer to it as I want to hire wicked smart people. And I'm not even from Boston, but I always say wicked smart people. And you start with that raw material, then going back to destination place to work, going back to the 3 legs underneath it, then do proper rewards and recognition, culture, and growth and development. And I think if you execute that well, you'll be in good shape. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
And is it working? Are you bringing those talented people to Homedale, to London, instead of, necessarily all congregating around the Googleplex?
I absolutely think so. And so again, we've got major centers of excellence for engineering, just as an example. So Homedale is a center of excellence for engineering, but it's actually smaller than what I've got in the UK, in Israel, and it's about the same size of what I have in Poland. So again, you have hiring centers throughout the world where I have major pockets of engineering. I've got engineering in Atlanta, I've got engineering in San Francisco. So, those 2,500 employees, I've got 200 of them in downtown San Francisco. So, we have a footprint, and we, again, organize centers of excellence in those functional areas where we can get the best talent.
You've mentioned this idea of sort of the end of tethered communication. What is the next phase of evolution in communication? What will communication look like next year, in 5 years?
The reason I'm so excited about where we sit as a platform company, a software platform, is that communications is just software. What I mean by that is we all grew up with a phone system communication that the phone would plug into the copper wire in the wall. And that whole, what they used to call PSTN network, packet switch telephone network, was the worldwide standard for telephony. The cell folks came around, and now you had cell voice communications. Now you have IP, Internet Protocol-based communications everywhere. So Vonage commercialized voice over IP back in the day, but those of us who use FaceTime on our iPhones is simply video over IP, or you use iMessage, it's simply messaging over IP. The point being is now communications has been normalized, unified by IP. Now you can just express it as software. It's simply an application that goes across the internet. It's no different than, I go to a website on the internet, that's an application. That website is an application of the internet. Voice is an application, messaging is an application, video is an application on the internet. So if it's simply a software application, then it can be programmed anywhere. And you're no longer tethered to the device. The way I like to talk about it is when I pull my phone out, my smartphone, I say, this is not a phone. This is simply a speaker and a microphone that has the ability to get on the internet. So, and also has a camera. So from this communications device that has a speaker, a video, and a microphone, I can choose, and a keyboard or a virtual keyboard, I can choose the form or the mode of communication that I want to use. I can do it as video, I can do it as audio, I can do it as messaging. So the point is, if now I'm untethered to a device, untethered from a physical phone, it simply requires connectivity to the internet, and it's just software, it can be programmed in anywhere. So the future communications are, and I tell this to audiences all the time, so I'll speak to an audience of hundreds and I'll say, if everyone were on their internet connector device of their choice, phone, tablet, Mac, PC, it doesn't matter, on the website or application of their choice in the future, there will be the opportunity from within that, from that device, which has gotten you to the internet, in whatever that application or website you're in, to click to communicate in the mode of your choice. And the choice will be dictated by personal preference and simply the limitations of the hardware. So if the hardware that you happen to get on the internet with doesn't have a camera, well, you're not going to do video. If it's only a keyboard device, you're only going to do some sort of messaging. Because that's the way now communications is evolving, and it's no longer tethered to a device, and it can be embedded or programmed in everywhere, my view is you're going to have this explosion in the, if you will, the consumption of communications. So I think we're in sort of this moment of kind of this renaissance where communication is just about to explode on us. But in order to be able to provide it, I can't be a monolithic application that I only do the functionality of the contact center or only do the functionality of the PBX. I have to have broken it down to its subcomponents, video, audio, SMS, IP messaging, what have you, so that I can be either built into those applications or sold unbundled anywhere. That's exactly what we're doing. And again, I think a few years from now, you're going to look back and the value creation in the world, again, has been from platform companies and will continue to be from platform companies. I think we're in the right spot to do that from the communications angle.
Are you ready today, or is there still more work to do to get there?
I think we're ready today. The businesses who are programming into communications, Gartner did a recent study that 5% of businesses in 2017 were programming in communications. And by 2020, just next year, it'll be 30%. So you see this rapid growth. And that's why things like our API platform side, we report that growth separately. So last quarter, it grew 42%. Decent sized piece of business growing at 42%. And we think the growth can increase from there. So it's an exciting place to be because we're sort of in the right side or the absolute correct side of the technology curve of where communications is going.
And so now thinking back a little bit, the cloud has completely disrupted what was Vonage. Are you already looking to see what's going to disrupt the cloud? Is there something that's going to disrupt the cloud?
The cloud is simply a delivery model. In the past, there was just software that was physically delivered and run on some proprietary hardware on premise. The cloud just, again, abstracts that from a delivery point of view. So now that I can, deliver once, you don't even deliver it. I host it. It sits in, either my own cloud resource or some third-party public cloud like Amazon or what have you, and it can be run anywhere. I don't see anything disrupting cloud on the horizon. I don't think it needs to. I think cloud is in its early days, still in its early days, because now if the application is run remotely in the cloud, some server remotely, then it's all about the connectivity to it. And so now that you have across the public internet, both wired and then wireless with 5G, broader and broader pipes, if you will, so that you can carry more and more payload, more and more capacity across the public internet. Now you see the opportunity for more and more kind of heavier weight things to happen. So that's why you see real-time streaming. You'll see more VR, AR, self-driving cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's all going to be run through cloud solutions that just require, broader band, if you will, fatter pipes in order to deliver it. So I don't see anything disrupting that yet because it is the disruption right now, and I think that will run its course for the next couple decades. So
cloud to provide it, Vonage to communicate with it. You recently announced Vonage Campus, the first conference by the company. Is that the sign? I know you said transformation is ongoing, but is that the sign that you fully have been accepted by the tech community as the enterprise software company?
I think so. Vonage Campus is the first worldwide customer developer conference. It's our inaugural event. And we're pairing that also with kind of a re-release of our brand and all the messaging around what Vonage is all about. And again, so in some respects, it is our coming out party, but the numbers, we've been sort of performing those to those levels for quite some time. Remember, just 5 years ago, we were 100% residential. Now, residential is the distinct minority and getting smaller all the time. We built this year in business segment, midpoint of guidance is over $800 million. We've already pre-guided Wall Street. The next year will be over $1 billion in the business segment. We've pre-guided Wall Street that from a service revenue perspective, the growth rate will approach 30% in Q4 of this year. We serve 115,000 business customers, 15 billion minutes of voice, 4 billion video minutes, about 20 billion messages. So I think from an enterprise perspective, we've arrived.
Well, Vonage has arrived. Thank you, Alan, so much for joining us inside the Ice House.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
That's our conversation for this week. Our guest was Alan Masarek, CEO of Vonage, that's NYSE ticker VG. If you like what you heard, please rate us on iTunes so other folks know where to find us. Got a question or comment you'd like one of our experts to tackle on a future show? Email us at icehouse@theice.com or tweet at us at IceHousePodcast. Our show is produced by Teresa DeLuca with production assistance from Stephen Romanchek and Ian Wolf. I'm Pete Ash, your host, signing off from the Library of the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.
Information contained in this podcast was obtained in part from publicly available sources and not independently verified. Neither ICE nor its affiliates make any representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information and do not sponsor, approve, or endorse any of the content herein, all of which is presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing herein constitutes an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy any security, or a recommendation of any security or trading practice. Some portions of the preceding conversation may have been edited for the purpose of length or clarity.